David, it's Betty Harrison. Do you remember that night in '68 when I pulled you out of the burning helicopter? Captain Harrison, of course I remember. What happened? I need your help, David. There are people here who need to be taught a lesson in respect. How much time do you have? They told me to get out of town in an hour, or not to leave at all. Hang tight, Betty. We're on our way. The best is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ends. In the quiet town of Midhaven, Oregon, 75-year-old Elizabeth Harrison had no idea that this ordinary Thursday would change everything. Gray hair, straight back, a legacy of decades of military service. She steered her battered Ford to Sam's gas station, a place she had been visiting for the last 35 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," greeted Tom, the young attendant. "As usual?" "Full tank, Tom," Betty replied, carefully getting out of the car. Her movements were measured, purposeful. The peaceful morning was shattered by the roar of motorcycles. The sound grew louder until the thunder of engines filled the gas station. 5, then 10, then 15 motorcycles rolled into the parking lot. Their chrome gleamed in the morning sun. The Black Wolves had arrived. Betty's hand remained steady on the pump. Military training kicked in. Assess the threat, stay alert, remain calm. The leader, Raven, dismounted his bike. His leather jacket was adorned with patches that spoke of violence. Eyes, cold as ice, focused on her. "Well, what do we have here? Grandma out for her morning stroll?" Raven's voice echoed across the parking lot, eliciting laughter from the gang. Betty continued to fill her tank. Her expression was neutral. "I'm just getting gay," she replied evenly. "No trouble needed." One of the bikers stepped closer. "Hey, Raven, check this out. Vietnam vet, heard? Granny claims she's a vet." Raven's laughter was sharp. "A woman vet? What were you doing in Vietnam, sweetheart? Serving coffee to real soldiers?" The words struck deep, but Betty did not flinch. They had no idea about the countless nights she spent in evacuation helicopters, about the hundreds of soldiers she saved. "I served my country," she said simply, putting the pump away. Raven stepped closer. "Served your country? The only thing you served was dinner." The gang surrounded her car. Tom disappeared inside the station, calling the police. Betty knew they wouldn't arrive in time. "You should move along," Raven continued, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "Midhaven belongs to the Black Wolves now." Betty straightened. Her eyes met Raven's without a tremor. "Young man, I've faced things that would make your gang run home to mommy crying. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting." She moved to open the door, but the thug slammed it shut. Betty's heartbeat did not waver. "Maybe you misunderstood me?" Raven leaned in close. "This is our town now, and in our town, you show respect." "Respect is earned, kid," Betty replied. "And so far, all I see are boys playing at being men." Raven's face twisted. His hand grabbed Betty. "Want to learn about respect? We'll teach you all about respect." Raven's fingers dug into her hand. Betty's mind raced back to that night in '68 when she pulled a young soldier from the burning wreckage of a helicopter. That soldier grew up to be Colonel David Steele Carter, the leader of the largest veterans biker club. The same David Carter who told her, "If you ever need anything, Betty, anything at all, just call." She knew that was about to change. The Black Wolves had no idea what they had just started. Raven's grip tightened. "Get your hand off me," Betty said. Her voice carried the same tone she used to command helicopter crews. Raven hesitated. "Or what, Grandma, are you going to complain about us?" "I don't make threats," Betty replied, freeing her hand. "But I promise you, son, you're making a mistake." One of the thugs laughed. Betty slipped into the car. Tom was inside the station on the phone, his face tense. She knew the local police were powerless. "You're not going anywhere," Raven declared, placing his hand on the hood. "Not until we teach you some respect." "Respect?" Betty started the engine. "I've earned mine, saving people twice as much as you in helicopters under fire. What have you done besides terrorizing innocent people?" Raven's face darkened. The gang surrounded her car. "Get out of the car," Raven demanded. "Right now." Betty reached for the phone. "Want to see what real respect looks like?" she asked. "Just wait," Raven laughed. "Oh, I get it. You're calling for help? Maybe your grandkids? The police? Go ahead, call whoever you want. We'll still be here." You boys ever heard of the Veterans Guardians? She asked, pressing the first digit. Several thugs shifted uncomfortably. The Veterans Guardians were well known, a club of combat veterans led by the legendary David Steele Carter. They were organized, disciplined. What does that have to do with anything? Asked the one with the snake tattoo, his voice tinged with uncertainty. It's simple, Betty replied, continuing to dial the number. Back in '68, there was a young lieutenant. His helicopter was shot down deep in enemy territory. Everyone said it was a suicide mission, but I flew in anyway. The phone began to ring. Raven's face wavered. That lieutenant, Betty continued, her voice carrying across the quiet parking lot. His name was David Carter. These days people call him Steele, and he owes me a favor. The call connected. Carter, a gruff voice answered. David, it's Beth Harrison. Remember that night near Kasani? There was a pause, then Steele's voice softened. Betty, of course I remember. I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you. What's going on? Betty's eyes locked onto Raven's. I've got some young men here who need a lesson in respect. The Black Wolves, they seem to think Mythaven belongs to them now. The change in Steele's voice was immediate, turning to Steele. Where? Sam's gas station? Don't rush to get here. Those boys aren't going anywhere. When she ended the call, the atmosphere in the parking lot shifted. The thugs nervously glanced at each other. Raven tried to maintain his composure. You're bluffing. Steele won't come just because some old lady called. Are you sure about that? Betty asked. Want to stick around and find out? In the distance, the distinct roar of approaching motorcycles filled the air. It was the synchronized roar of a disciplined unit. Raven's face paled. Get on, he barked at his gang. We're not done here, old lady. Not by a long shot. No, Betty agreed, watching them scramble onto their bikes. But now the rules have changed. Raven pointed at Betty. This isn't over. You've just complicated things for yourself. Betty watched them leave. She knew they would be back, but now the rules had changed. As the sound of the Veterans Guardians grew closer, she allowed herself a small smile. The Black Wolves were about to learn what real power looked like, and the lesson was just beginning. The Veterans Guardians arrived like thunder. 50 riders, each a combat veteran, filled the parking lot. At the forefront stood Colonel David Steele Carter. Tom, the gas station attendant, watched with wide eyes. These men moved with military precision. Steele dismounted first. Long time no see, Captain Harrison, he said. Too long, David, Betty replied. Tell me everything, Steele said. As Betty recounted the events, the faces of the veterans darkened. Black wolves, one of them spat. It's time someone taught them a lesson. Steele raised his hand. Betty taught me something important back in '68. Do you remember what you told me that night, Captain? When everyone else said the mission was impossible, I told you that courage is not the absence of fear. Betty smiled. It's doing the right thing even when you're scared. Right, David nodded. And you showed us what that meant when you flew into that hot zone. One of the younger veterans stepped forward. Wait, is that Angel Kasani, the medic who saved the entire 5th Platoon? The one and only, David confirmed. The veterans' faces hardened. The Black Wolves will be back, Betty said. They're not the type to let this go. Let them come, David replied. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Tell me about their leader, this Raven. Betty described Raven. They've been terrorizing Midhaven for months, Tom added. The police can't or won't do anything about them. David nodded slowly. Betty, you have a veterans meeting today, don't you? You're going, David interrupted, like any other day, but you're not going alone. He turned to his people. Alpha team, you're on escort. Beta and Charlie start patrols. I want eyes on every corner of Midhaven. The Black Wolves want to play games? Let's show them how veterans do business. The veterans moved with efficiency. David turned to Betty. We'll handle this, Captain, the old way. Betty looked at the veterans. Just try not to wreck the town in the process, David. Midhaven has been my home for 40 years. No promises, David smirked. But these boys need to learn that respect isn't taken by force. It's earned. The convoy pulled out from the gas station. Tom watched, a smile spreading across his face. Something was changing in Midhaven. In an abandoned warehouse, the Black Wolves clubhouse, Raven paced. Veteran guardians, he spat. Of all the people in this worthless town, we had to pick her. It's just another motorcycle club, said the snake tattoo. No, these guys are different. Diesel shook his head. They have military training, discipline. I don't care who they are, Raven exploded. This is our town now. We can't let some old lady and her veteran friends push us out. At the Veterans Center, Betty shared the events of the morning. I remembered something this morning, Betty said. Something from my last mission in Vietnam. We were extracting a group of Marines under heavy fire. The helicopter was taking hits. The hydraulics were failing, but we couldn't leave those boys. One of the young Marines asked me later why I went back for them. I told him, sometimes the greatest act of courage is to stand up for others when everyone else looks away. David nodded. That's what we're doing now, Betty, standing up for Midhaven. The distant roar of motorcycles filled the air. The Black Wolves were returning with reinforcements. At least 30 additional riders, David noted. David, I won't allow violence in the Veterans Center. Betty stood up. These people come here for healing, not for fights. Agreed, David replied. Delta Team, escort our veterans out the back. Everyone else, take a seat. We're moving this somewhere else. Outside, the Black Wolves lined up. Raven shouted, Come out, old lady! You and your veteran friends can't hide in there forever. David stepped out first, followed by the veteran guardians. Betty appeared last. Son, she called to Raven, you're making a mistake. Back off before someone gets hurt. Raven's response was interrupted by police sirens. Police Chief Roberts stepped out. No one fights in my Veterans Center. Raven, you and your boys need to leave, now. Raven revved his bike. This isn't over. As the Black Wolves retreated, David said, He's right about one thing, this isn't over. Betty nodded, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. Roberts approached them. Betty, David, we need to talk. The Black Wolves have been a problem for months, but now they're desperate. Betty studied the map of Midhaven. They systematically took over the city. Now half the city is afraid to speak. We are looking at 75 riders in total. They have established a presence along every major route. They are not just terrorizing the city, they are controlling it. We have intelligence suggesting they are getting into drug trafficking. No more, David darkened. Calm down, David, Betty warned. We need to be smarter than them. Tell me, Chief, why didn't you act against them earlier? Politics, Roberts replied bitterly. Plus, we have reason to believe someone in the mayor's office is on their payroll. In the Black Wolves' warehouse, Raven was holding his war council. The Veterans Guards are different, warned a rider. They have military training, discipline. I don't care who they are, Raven slammed his fist. This is our city now. We can't let some old lady and her veteran friends push us out. Back at the Veterans Center, Sarah Chen joined them. We need to understand what we are really fighting for, Betty said. This isn't about territory or pride. It's about the soul of Midhaven. The Black Wolves are not just threatening our safety. They are threatening our way of life. How do we fight them without turning Midhaven into a war zone? David asked. Just like I fought in Vietnam, Betty replied, with precision, intelligence, and by choosing our battles wisely. We start with the businesses they are extorting. The Veterans Guards provide protection. Meanwhile, we gather evidence of their drug operation. Are they going to lie down and take it? Sarah warned. No, Betty agreed. That's exactly what we are counting on. When people get angry, they become reckless. David grimly smiled. Lure them in, make them commit their forces, then hit them where they are weak. Exactly, Betty nodded. But this time we are not fighting with bullets. We are fighting for hearts and minds. This could work, but it's risky, Roberts said thoughtfully. The Black Wolves will retaliate. Of course, Betty said calmly, but this time we will be ready. David stood up. Okay, Betty, we will do it your way, but I want you protected at all times. Betty smiled. David, I've been shot at by better men than Raven. Sarah pulled Betty aside. You know what you're starting here, don't you? This could change everything. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Betty replied. Sometimes things need to change. Sometimes they need to be forced to change. The war for Midhaven was about to enter a new phase. Dawn broke over the historic district of Midhaven. The street was quiet except for the rumble of the Veterans Guard's motorcycles. Inside Vincent Hardware, Frank Vincent was experiencing his first peaceful morning. "They usually show up by this time," he said to two veterans. "Not today, Betty," Mike grimly nodded. Betty sat in Diana's cafe. "They will check us out," David said. "Probably today." "I'm counting on it," Betty replied. The sound of approaching motorcycles filled the air. The Black Wolves appeared. Raven led the pack but stopped upon seeing the Veterans Guards. "Right on schedule," Betty murmured. Raven revved his engine and dismounted, walking toward Vincent Hardware. Two veterans stepped forward to meet him. "This is private property," Mike said calmly. "Mr. Vincent is no longer interested in your kind of protection." "Is that true?" Raven growled. Frank Vincent stepped out of the store. "You heard them, Raven. We don't need your protection." Raven's hand jerked toward his jacket, but he froze upon seeing the Veterans Guards. "This isn't over, old man," Raven spat at Frank. He turned his eyes to Betty. "Did you do this? You think you can just come in and turn everyone against us?" Betty slowly stood up, stepping out of the cafe. "What exactly have you built, kid?" Her voice was firm. Fear, intimidation. "This isn't building. It's destruction." Other business owners stepped out of their stores. "You don't understand anything." Raven's voice trembled. "This city was dead before we came. We made him strong." "No," Betty replied. "You made him scared. There's a difference." She gestured at the veterans. "These men and women know what real strength is. Respect isn't taken by force. It's earned through actions." Raven's face contorted. He stepped toward Betty, but David and three other veterans blocked him. "Think carefully about your next move, son." David's voice was soft but carried the edge of steel. Raven retreated. "This is our city. Want a war? You've got one." The Black Wolves tore away. Surprisingly, someone started clapping. Others joined in. Frank Vincent approached Betty, tears in his eyes. "Thank you. We were scared." "You don't have to be scared anymore," Betty assured him. "But this isn't over. Raven will be back." David joined them. "We won the first battle. But you're right, this is just the beginning." "Let him try," Betty replied. "Every move he makes now just shows Midhaven who he really is and who we really are." Sarah Chen arrived. "The Black Wolves are gathering in their warehouse, calling for more reinforcements." "Good, let them come," Betty nodded. "The more forces they put in, the more vulnerable they become." She turned to the gathered crowd. "Today, we showed them that Midhaven is no longer afraid, but tomorrow they will try to remind us why we should be. We need to be ready." Night fell over Midhaven. The veteran guards maintained patrols. Tension was rising 3 days after the confrontation. Betty sat in the living room scrolling through messages. "Movement at the warehouse." Sarah's voice came through. "A large group is heading out. At least 30 bikes." "All units hold positions," David replied. Silence shattered with the sound of breaking glass. "Fire at Vincent Hardware. Several intruders moving fast." Another message. "Molotov cocktail at Diana's cafe. They're hitting multiple targets." "All units converge on the city center." David's voice remained firm. Betty was already moving. "Sarah, you're their main target. You need to stay safe." "Those are my friends out there," Betty replied. "I started this. I won't hide while they suffer for it." The radio crackled. "Pete's Auto Shop is on fire!" Sarah and Betty exchanged a glance. This wasn't random violence. "Let me through," Betty demanded. Sarah didn't argue. The center of Midhaven had become a battlefield. The Black Wolves struck quickly. Fire trucks were already on the scene. "They knew exactly when to hit," David said. "Your mole in City Hall," Betty nodded grimly. "They're trying to show the city what happens when people resist." "This is just the beginning," David warned. A new voice cut through the radio. "They're in the Veterans Center, several hostile, armed." Betty's blood ran cold. "This crosses the line," David growled. "Wait," Betty called. "This is what they want, to draw our forces thin. It's not about property damage. Raven is trying to break our spirit." Frank Vincent stepped forward. "What do we do then? Just let them burn our city?" "No," Betty replied. "We show them that fire strengthens steel. It doesn't destroy it." She looked at the crowd. Raven thinks he can break us by breaking our things. But Myth Haven isn't about buildings, it's about people. And people, when they stand together, are stronger than any gang. More townspeople began to arrive, bringing water, supplies. Sarah, Betty turned, contact every business owner. Tell them we're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. It's time Myth Haven showed Raven what real strength is. David nodded. Are you thinking about Operation Thunderclap? Something like that, Betty smiled. But this time we're fighting not just for territory, we're fighting for home. The fires continued to burn, but they illuminated more than just destruction. They showed neighbors helping neighbors. The Black Wolves wanted to break the spirit of Myth Haven. Instead, they forged it stronger. As dawn approached, Betty stood before the damaged Veterans Center. She knew that Raven had made a critical mistake. The war for Myth Haven was entering a new phase. The community center was packed by dawn. Last night, the Black Wolves showed us what they think power is, Betty began. Today, we show them what real power is. Frank Vincent stood up. How? They have the numbers, the weapons, and someone in City Hall feeding them information. That's exactly why we're going to win, Betty replied. True power isn't about how much damage you can inflict. It's about how much you can endure and still keep fighting. David stepped forward. We have ownership of the old factory on Riverside Street. Starting this morning, it will be our new headquarters. The factory sat at a strategic intersection. But that's not all, Betty continued. Every business they attacked last night, we are going to restore. Not one by one, all of them. Today? Diana stood up. How? Most of us don't have insurance. You don't need it, announced Sarah Chen. The Veterans Guardians have established a community recovery fund. We have enough to restore every damaged business. David raised his hand. This is phase 1. Phase 2, make sure it doesn't happen again. Betty pointed to the map. The Black Wolves think they can control Myth Haven through fear, but they have a weakness. They need the city's infrastructure. Starting today, every business in Myth Haven can operate under new safety rules. Members of the Veterans Guardians will train your staff. We will help install panic buttons, surveillance systems. What about their inside source? Someone shouted. The mole in City Hall has already been dealt with, Robert spoke up. We fed them false patrol routes. A spark of hope began to spread. Here's what happens next, Betty continued. Every business they attacked will reopen at sunset. We work together. Frank Vincent stood up. My shop was hit pretty hard. Sunset is pretty soon. You will have help, David assured him. Half of the Veterans Guardians are skilled tradespeople. Sarah stepped forward. We divided the city into sectors. Everything is organized. All we need now is you. The room was quiet. Then Diana stood up. So what are we waiting for? My cafe isn't going to restore itself. The meeting turned into an organizational session. Outside, the sound of construction had already begun. You know, Raven won't take this lying down, David said. I'm counting on it, Betty replied. But this time when he strikes, he won't be hitting isolated targets. He'll be facing a united front. Sarah approached. We have the Black Wolves watching from the edges of the city. They see everything. Good, Betty nodded. Let them watch. By midday, Vincent Hardware had a new roof. Diana's cafe was serving free coffee. The damage to the Veterans Center had been repaired. Betty stood outside. The Black Wolves had tried to burn the spirit of Myth Haven. Instead, they ignited something else. The war was far from over, but the rules had changed. The Black Wolves' warehouse vibrated with tension. They've restored everything, the snake tattoo said incredulously. In one day. Not everything, Raven growled. They've done more than just restore. The video feed showed the changes. New cameras, reinforced doors, tactical training. They're organized, Diesel quietly noted. Military precision. Raven threw a bottle. That old woman, she's not just fighting back. She's changing the whole game. The warehouse door opened. Clerk Mary hurried inside. We have big problems, he announced. The Veterans Guardians have filed for official security contracts with 20 major businesses. They're going legal. They're taking our protection racket. What about police patrols? Raven's face darkened. They fed me bad information. The clerk shook his head. At the Veterans Guardians headquarters, Betty was reviewing the security channels. They're getting desperate, David noted. They've lost income, lost their intelligence network. Desperate people are dangerous people, Betty replied. Raven is too proud to back down. He'll try something big. Sarah entered with a tablet. You were right about following the money. The Black Wolves are involved in more than just protection rackets. They have drug supply lines running through 3 states. That's federal territory, Roberts commented. The DEA will be very interested. Not yet, Betty said. We need to let them think they still have that option. The radio crackled. Several vehicles are entering the city of Ciavis from the north. They're not bikes, heavy trucks, at least 4 of them. David moved to the window. Looks like Raven has called in supplier connections. These aren't local boys. Betty watched the trucks. Involvement of the cartel, probably, Sarah confirmed. If they lose Midhaven, they lose everything. Everything has changed, Betty concluded. This is bigger than just our town. Raven has brought in players who won't care about collateral damage. The trucks is split up. They're creating new safe houses, David noted. No, Betty corrected. They're surrounding us, creating a perimeter. They're preparing for war. Roberts checked his weapon. Should I call the state police? Not yet, Betty insisted. We need to handle this our way first. She approached the map. Raven is trying to show us he has powerful friends, but he also showed us something else. He's scared. What's our play? David asked. We let them think they have the advantage, Betty replied. In the meantime, we gather evidence, track their movements. Sarah nodded, like tracking the Viet Cong supply line. Exactly, Betty confirmed. But this time we're gathering intelligence not just for ourselves. We're documenting, building a case strong enough that when we call in the authorities, they won't just get Raven, they'll get the whole network. The room fell silent. It will get worse before it gets better, Betty warned. These new players won't follow any rules. Then we better make sure he won't be around, David declared. Our patrols are doubled. Every business is getting extra security. No one in Midhaven stands alone. As the sun set, Betty watched the trucks settle in. Raven thought he was showing strength. Instead, he revealed his weakness. They could shut down the entire criminal operation. But first, they needed to survive. A real war was about to begin. A week of tension enveloped Midhaven. The cartel trucks had established positions. The Black Wolves patrolled with audacity. Betty sat studying surveillance photos. Movement in the northern safe house. Sarah's voice came through. A big shipment is coming. Document everything, David replied. A knock at the door. Frank Vincent. They approached me today, he said. Offered to buy my shop for 3 times its worth. They're trying to buy your silence, Betty's eyes narrowed. The radio crackled. Several vehicles are approaching from the south, private military contractors. David's voice was grim. These aren't street thugs. They're professional killers. Betty watched the SUVs. Looks like Raven has called in more than just cartel support, Sarah confirmed. In the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven met with Marshall, the commander of the mercenaries. Your gang war has attracted attention, Marshall stated. My employers want the situation resolved quickly and quietly. This isn't a gang war, Raven protested. It's about respect. About what? Business? Marshall interrupted. You have 48 hours to resolve this, or we will resolve it our way. What about the old lady, the veterans? Professional problems require professional solutions, Marshall smiled. At the Veterans Guardians headquarters, Betty called an emergency meeting. These contractors are changing everything, she explained. They're not thugs we can intimidate, they're trained killers. We have combat experience too, David reminded her. Yes, but we also have something to lose, Betty retorted. Sarah raised the footage. They're creating sniper nests. Then we respond in kind, David declared. Betty shook her head. That's exactly what they want. Escalation. Innocent people get caught in the crossfire. So what's the play? Roberts asked. Betty approached the map. We let them think they have the advantage. Meanwhile, we prepare for their real target. Me. The room fell silent. I propose we give him what he wants, Betty confirmed. A clear shot at me, but on our terms. That's too risky, Sarah protested. These are professional killers. Betty's smile was light. The Viet Cong sniper in Khe Sanh was just as professional. I'm still here, She turned to the room. Raven thinks that bringing in professionals gives him an edge, but professionals follow patterns. We can use that against them. The strategic session stretched into dawn. The veterans' guards would retreat, effectively strengthening hidden positions. We're fighting not just for Myth Haven anymore, Betty reminded. We're fighting for every city these people might attack next. David pulled Betty aside. Do you know they're coming for you? I'm counting on it, she replied. Sometimes the best way to disarm a trap is to trigger it intentionally. The sun rose. Two forces prepared for confrontation. The next 48 hours would determine the fate of the city. Betty Harrison had faced death before. Now she would face it again. This time she was fighting for the soul of Myth Haven itself. The first sign of trouble came at dawn. The veterans' guards had vanished. Betty walked alone to Diana's cafe. She counted 3 teams of mercenaries tracking her. You shouldn't be here alone, Diana said. That's exactly why I need to be here, Betty replied. Let them watch. Marshall observed. The target establishes predictable patterns. Either she's become careless or it's a trap, Raven concluded. It doesn't matter, Marshall replied. Predictable targets are dead targets. At the Veterans Guards headquarters, Sarah monitored hidden cameras. 4 sniper teams, Sarah noted, plus 3 ground teams. They're building a kill zone. They're following standard elimination protocols, David nodded. Sarah zoomed in on the feed showing Raven. He doesn't look happy. He's lost control, David observed. Throughout the morning, Betty maintained her routine. She's making this too easy, Marshall commented. Veterans don't just give up like that. Maybe she's tired, a subordinate suggested. She's 75. Marshall's expression darkened. Age has nothing to do with it. I've seen her type before. Calm, those who have seen real war. They're the most dangerous. At the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven was losing patience. Just take the shot. What are you waiting for? Professional work requires professional patience, Marshall replied. What no one noticed was the change in the movements of the townspeople. Information was being relayed. The veterans' guards had gone underground. David's voice came through Betty's earpiece. The cartel is moving product through the northern safe house. We've got it all on camera. Good, Betty subvocalized. Keep documenting. How is our guest ready to talk? He's ready to talk, Sarah replied. The guest was a city clerk. By late afternoon, Marshall completed preparations. Green light for tonight, he announced. We're finishing this after sunset. Raven smiled ominously, but in the darkness, other movements went unnoticed. The veterans were returning, taking up hidden positions. Equipment recorded every location. Betty sat in Diana's cafe. Marshall approached. The mercenary commander had decided to handle this personally. The bell rang. Marshall entered, accompanied by 2 men. Miss Harrison, Marshall said, I think it's time we talked. Betty set down her cup. I was wondering when you would stop hiding behind your scope. It's professional courtesy, Marshall declared. A chance to end this quietly. Professional courtesy? There was a note of amusement in Betty's voice. Is that what we call killing for a paycheck now? Marshall's expression didn't change. You've caused problems for people who don't tolerate problems. Leave now or you won't leave at all. I've dealt with better people than you, Betty replied calmly. What are you really fighting for, Marshall? For a moment, something flickered in the mercenary's eyes. Then it vanished. You have 1 hour to leave the city, he said. After that, everything that happens is not personal. It's just business. When Marshall left, Betty smiled slightly. Everything was going exactly according to plan. The next hour would change everything, but not in the way Marshall or Raven expected. The trap was about to close. The hour that Marshall had given was ticking away in silence. Night had fully engulfed Myth Haven. Marshall was watching the timer. All teams, final position check, he ordered. The target hasn't moved, the observer reported. No signs of veteran Guardians activity. Marshall frowned. Something felt wrong. Sir, the deputy spoke up, the cartels are reporting unusual traffic patterns on the outskirts. In the Black Wolves warehouse, Raven paced nervously. This should have been settled days ago, the cartel representative said. Your personal vendetta is getting expensive. Just wait, Raven snapped. Once the old lady is gone, everything will go back to normal. The cartel member's smile was like a razor's edge. Nothing will go back to normal after tonight. In the cafe, Betty glanced at the clock. All in position. David's teams are ready. Understood, Betty subvocalized. Time to show our hand. The hour reached 0. Marshall picked up the radio, but before he could speak, every light in Myth Haven went out. The city plunged into darkness. Then the floodlights ignited, illuminating the sniper nests. "We're compromised," Team 2 shouted. "Several hostiles approaching fast." Marshall grabbed his night vision goggles. The veteran guardians were coming out of hiding. "All teams, fall back to secondary positions," Marshall ordered. But it was too late. Team 4 is pinned down. Team 1 is taking fire. We've lost contact with Team 3. In the cafe, Betty stood up calmly. Diana and the other patrons revealed themselves as veteran guardians. Betty spoke into the radio. "I think we need to talk again about professional courtesy." Outside, the sound of helicopters filled the air. DEA aircraft were moving into position. The cartel's safe houses were surrounded by federal agents. "Did you plan this?" Marshall's voice came through the radio. "Patterns? Predictability? Was all of this a setup?" "Of course it was," Betty replied. "Did you really think a Vietnam veteran would be that careless?" Marshall's SUV turned the corner, but the way was blocked. "You have two choices, Marshall," Betty informed him. "Surrender now or try to break through against people who have spent their lives perfecting the art of war." Silence. Then Marshall's voice. "Stop! All units!" The mercenaries surrendered, but it wasn't over yet. Raven and his Black Wolves were still unaccounted for. The night was about to get even darker. Raven stood in the Black Wolves' warehouse, watching his world crumble. "This is the end," Diesel said quietly. "We need to surrender." "The end?" Raven's laughter held a hint of madness. "Does that old lady think she won? She hasn't seen what I'm truly capable of." He headed for the storeroom, entering the code. The door swung open, revealing explosives. "Boss?" The snake tattoo backed away. "This is going too far. We're bikers, not terrorists." "We are what I say we are," Raven shouted, loading the explosives into the van. "If I can't have Myth Haven, then neither can it." At the Veterans Guardians headquarters, Tara's voice crackled with urgency. "Betty, we have movement at the warehouse. Thermal images show they are loading something into vehicles. Military-grade explosives." Betty's mind raced. This was about destruction. "All units," she commanded. "Raven has gone rogue. We need to stop him before he reaches any populated areas." The veteran guardians mobilized. "You're not going out there?" David protested. "Hell no, I'm not," she replied. "This started with me, and I'm going to finish it." The Black Wolves burst out of the warehouse. Raven led the attack. "You should have left me alone, old woman." Raven's laughter crackled over the radio. "Now everyone will see what real power looks like." Betty sharply turned down an alley. "Sarah," she called, "remember that construction site on Maple Street? Get a unit to run ahead of Raven. Make him turn east on 3rd. The construction site is a dead end." David's voice came through. "Exactly," Betty replied. The veteran guardians moved into position. Raven didn't realize he was being maneuvered. The convoy crashed into the construction site, trapped. Concrete barriers blocked every exit. Raven jumped off his bike, pulling out the detonator. "Back off," he shouted. "One click, and this whole place goes up." Betty's Ford stopped. She got out. "Is this what you wanted, Raven?" she called. "To prove you're the most dangerous man in Myth Haven? You've proven you're willing to kill innocent people to satisfy your ego." "Shut up," Raven yelled. "You did this. You turned everyone against me." "No," Betty replied, stepping forward. "You did this yourself. Every time you chose fear over respect." The remaining Black Wolves looked uncertain. "One more step, and I'll do it," Raven threatened. "I'll take us all out." Betty kept walking. "No, you won't, because deep down you're still that scared little boy." Real power isn't about who you can hurt, Raven. It's about who you can protect. For a moment, something flickered in Raven's eyes. Then his finger tensed. But before he could press it, a shot rang out. Diesel, his oldest friend, made his choice. The bullet hit Raven's hand, sending the detonator flying. The last stand of the Black Wolves ended not with an explosion, but with the click of handcuffs and the quiet shrieks of a broken man. As federal agents secured the explosives, Betty stood. The night almost became tragic, but redemption came from within the gang. "You knew," David said. "You knew someone would stop him?" "I knew his own people would make the right choice," Betty replied. "Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating the enemy, it's helping them find their conscience." Dawn was approaching. A year later, Myth Haven had transformed into something no one could have predicted. Betty Harrison, now 76 years old, sat in Diana's cafe. The veteran guardians had evolved into a community center. "Good morning, Miss Betty," called James, the former snake tattoo. "How's the mentoring program going, James?" Betty asked. 3 more former gang members are starting next week," he smiled. "Word is spreading. People want to know how Myth Haven did it." Through the window, Betty saw the changes. Frank Vincent's shop was thriving, run in partnership with former wolves. Diana's cafe had become a gathering place. David walked in. "Just got word from Marshall. He's getting released early, still wants to join." "Good," Betty nodded. Sarah Chen arrived. "The government is interested in our rehabilitation program. They want to use Myth Haven as a model." "Tell them it's not about programs," Betty replied. "It's about believing that people can change." A group of motorcycles rode by. The veteran guardians rode alongside the former Black Wolves. Their bikes were no longer symbols of intimidation, but of unity. "Remember when all this started?" David asked. "One phone call." "One phone call," Betty agreed, "but it was never really about that. It was about showing people another kind of strength." Diesel, now the civilian coordinator, appeared. "They are ready for you at the ceremony, Betty." The ceremony was held in the town square, where a new memorial was being dedicated. The crowd represented every aspect of Myth Haven. As Betty approached the podium, she looked at the faces. The memorial bore a simple inscription: "Strength through unity, peace through understanding." "A year ago," she began, "Myth Haven stood at a crossroads. We could have chosen revenge. Instead, we chose something harder. We chose to believe in the power of change." A lone motorcycle approached, Raven's younger brother. He had written to Betty from prison, asking if Myth Haven's second chances extended to family. Her response was simple: "Come home. We will help you find your way." "We built something here that is stronger than fear," Betty continued. "Something that cannot be broken because it is based not on power over others, but on power with them. This is the true legacy of Myth Haven." Applause followed. Later, as the sunset painted the sky, Betty sat on the porch with David and Sarah. The sound of motorcycles no longer brought tension. "You know," David reflected, "when you made that first call, I thought we were just going to chase off some troublemakers." "I thought the same," Betty admitted, "but sometimes the best victories are the ones you never planned." A group of children rode past in bicycles. They were followed by an escort of veteran guardians. "The town calls this the miracle of Myth Haven," Sarah mentioned. "But it wasn't really a miracle, was it?" "No," Betty smiled. "It was just people discovering their best selves. Sometimes they just need someone who believes they can." It was a true triumph in Myth Haven, not the defeat of an enemy, but the transformation of one. One phone call started it all, but it was love, courage, and faith in the power of change that finished it. And in the end, that made all the difference. As the stars appeared, Betty knew that the town would continue to grow, continue to change, continue to prove that even in the darkest times, there is always hope for redemption. And sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to make a call. On that quiet evening, Betty Harrison realized the most important truth. She proved that an 80-year-old woman with a brave heart and faith in human kindness can change the world, and that love is always stronger than fear. As the last ray of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, Betty closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would be a new day, new opportunities to help, new lives, and she would be ready.